This is the Root Advice Podcast with TikTok influencer Rudy A. Divorced after 16 years of marriage and single at 39, I share my mistakes and experiences to help your marriage, improve your dating life, and prepare you for life after divorce. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2 of Root Advice. And today I'm going to have a special guest, a guy, you know what, I consider a friend. We met on YouTube not too long ago. I mean, I've known of him for a few years, but last year was one of the first times I've actually collaborated with him. He invited me to do a Resident Evil collab, and we've hit it off ever since. That is Cody Leach, YouTube superstar. Right now, he's at about 89,000 followers, and he's going to hit 100K within a month or so. He's that good. And what I love and respect about Cody is a number of things. First off, I love his reviews because he's one of the few YouTubers that I trust who's absolutely 100% authentic. You know he's not bullshitting you. He's truthful, and he's always going to be that way. So you know you can count on him for an honest, non-influenced with all this agenda bullshit out there review. He's going to be a straight-up dude. But not in the interview today, I'm not really going to touch on YouTube a lot. We do discuss that, but I wanted to know a little bit about him before YouTube, his upbringing, his married life, and such like that, because the guy's 32, but he's an old soul. He's very mature for his age, so I want to touch on his upbringing, his relationship with his father, and where that his passion for movies came from, and being a father as well. So again, Cody Leach is my guest today, and again, Cody, thank you so much for joining me. And without further ado, let's get to the interview. Cody Leach, everybody, YouTube superstar here in the house. How's it going, Cody?
Not too bad. Not too bad. I'm dealing with a cold right now, but hopefully I'm on the mend. Other than that, can't complain.
Yeah, you're breathing like I just said earlier, like Michael Myers in the 78 film, man, The Breather, man. But thank you for doing this. I know you're under the weather, man. And for those who don't know, Cody and I guess, obviously he's on YouTube, and I met him I knew of him about maybe 3 years ago. I saw him around, but it wasn't until about a year ago when you asked me to collaborate with you on a Resident Evil collaboration, and that's how we hit it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The rest is history.
The rest is history, man. And yeah, he's a cool dude, and it's really cool that YouTube actually, I never would have met this guy or even talked to him if it wasn't for YouTube kind of bringing us together in that space. So it's pretty damn cool. But Cody, again, YouTube, you finally became a full-time YouTuber, what, about a year ago?
Yeah, middle of September. So it's just about a year here, very soon.
And what is it like being a full-time YouTuber? I know a lot of people may have that dream to be a full-time YouTuber, do what you love. And here you are, you're actually living a lot of people's dreams. So how is that like in the reality sense? How's it like behind the scenes?
It's different. A year later, I still haven't completely gotten used to it. Because I've never worked from home from before. I've never worked for myself before. It's still kind of weird to wrap my mind around the fact that my job is talking about movies and stuff like that. It's just, it doesn't seem real still. I'm just kind of like, all right, somebody tell me when the joke is up. Like the checks are still getting cashed, but like, come on now. So yeah, it's fun. It's definitely freeing, especially when you come from like my previous place of employment was pretty miserable. So coming from something like that, where you go to bed depressed and wake up angry every single day, and being able to just get rid of that, go to bed excited for the next day, and wake up happy, like, man, this is what I get to do. I love being able to make my own schedule and stuff like that. So it's cool. Like, if, my wife's tired, she wants to go to bed early or whatever, I can just come in here and edit videos for the next couple of days and just get ahead of myself and come up with ideas or noodle around with some new features or whatever. So it's always cool to be able to do something that you can just be completely free with. You don't have to have a boss to report to. You don't have a quota to meet. You don't have code of conduct that you have to follow or whatever. You just kind of make your own rules. So that's what I really like about it. It does get a little bit exhausting having to spend so much of your time and energy on social media, though. Like, there's great things about it. Like, we were just talking about, like, me and you hooking up and meeting and everything like that. All that stuff is awesome. And then there's the dark side to it. And even though the dark side to it is always smaller, it's also the louder part of it. So it's like, I tried to explain it to my wife a couple of days ago, because there was some dark stuff going on in regards to my little circle of YouTube and everything. And it kind of had me down for a couple of days. And I tried to explain it to her, and I'm like, you can't really grasp it unless you actually do it. Like, it's easy to say, oh, just ignore it, or oh, don't feed the trolls, or, just don't talk to those people. And it's like, well, when you read those comments multiple times a day, every single day, even though it's one comment versus, 50 nice comments, it's going to chip away at that armor after a while.
Yeah.
And so that's the only part that's still kind of hard, is just finding a way to balance engaging with your audience and I try to be more accessible and more personable than a lot of the bigger YouTubers that I've kind of come up looking up to, because they kind of seem like they upload their video and then they kind of just, they upload their video and duck and then just kind of go away back to life.
Yeah.
And so it's still hard trying to figure out how to balance being personable, being somebody that's not just a talking head on YouTube, but also not like letting social media, the dark side of it, kind of flood into your personal life, because it's going to at some point or another.
Yeah, and I know it's tough for people who are listening to understand that, because I never had like any major audience until TikTok, and here I am with 240,000 people. And before all this happened, I was like, they're what taking a mental break. They're just being sissies, whatever. I mean, what's the big deal? And then you're in it, and then you see a negative comment. Oh, it doesn't bother you. And like I said, you all of a sudden start getting numb to all the praise. You can have like a video with 300 positive comments about your work and what you're doing, and then there's that one comment that you read, and I allowed it to get to me. And I think you just touched on that as well. So, and plus, I think you and I have been in those types of situations where the universe is kind of just caves in on you, and you have so much negative things being said about you that aren't true. They don't know the full story. And, for me, I feel like compelled sometimes to reach out to every single one of them. No, that's not true. This is what really happened. Listen to me.
It's so hard. It's so hard. Yeah. You're like, listen to me, please.
I'm not a jerk. I promise I'm a nice guy. But and we're grown men. And so it's tough to imagine how some people out there who are maybe younger, who achieve this type of stardom and attention, how they can handle that. So for those listening, it's not easy. It really can take a burden on your mind, and you can lose yourself in all that.
It's like I tried to explain to my wife like this. Like, just imagine you're going about your daily life, driving to work, going to lunch or whatever, coming home.
Yeah.
And at some random point in the day, every single day, a complete stranger walks up to you and it's like, you're a piece of garbage, and then walks away.
Yeah.
Once you're like, well, that was weird. Twice, okay, that's very strange. Every day for weeks and weeks and weeks. How long does it take before that really starts to get to you? You know what I mean? Right. And that's pretty much what it's like. You're scrolling through the comments. Oh, look at all this nice stuff. Piece of trash. And I'm like, oh, okay. Keep scrolling.
Yeah, it's tough, man. But YouTube. So you said you came from a place that you were depressed at working. So before YouTube, before the stardom and, where you're at now, having the comfortable freedom that you have, what were you doing before YouTube?
My job previous to this, I was in avionics. I was in a production line building commercial aircrafts for, or nice. Private aircrafts rather, for really rich people.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, so I was on the line doing basically at the point where the plane pieces come together and they start to put all of the wiring through the plane. That's where my job started. So I did that for between 3 and 4 years, somewhere like that.
I hear that's a good paycheck, though. I mean, that's a lot of training and specific training, right? So that's a good living? Not really? No, YouTube's better?
I mean, it's a good paycheck, but I don't think it's worth all the misery that comes along with it. Is it better than some jobs out there? Sure, but I mean, like a big conversation that, society in general is pretty much having nowadays is even a good paycheck is like, but for the amount that it costs to live, is it really that good of a paycheck? You know what I mean? So it was fine. It was fine.
It was fine? Okay. Yeah. And the love for movies, because obviously you have a passion for it. Even before we were friends, I saw a few of your videos from time to time, and you definitely love what you're doing, and, it feels like a natural thing. So where did this love for movies come from?
A lot of it probably came from my dad. He was a single parent, and it was just me and him for a long time. So music, movies, stuff like that, he pretty much instilled in me, and I liked what he liked, and kind of vice versa. I still liked some kid stuff, but, when everybody else was growing up watching Lady and the Tramp and stuff like that, I'm watching Terminator 2 and Lost Boys and on loop.
Nice.
So a lot of it's that. A lot of it's just always loving stories and loving where the imagination can go and things. And it's always an escape. You know, video games as well is a big one where it wasn't like I had a rough childhood or anything like that, but I certainly had I had some rough things here and there with my mom and with, you know, we've all got stories of being bullied in school and stuff like that. So movies and different art forms like that were always kind of an escape for me, to where I just kind of go off to Skynet and things like that and just live in that world for 2.5 hours.
Gotcha. So your dad was the one who kind of showed you all those films and such. It's funny how like you and I have that common background, because my father, you know, he just passed, but he's the one who introduced me to films. Like the first memory I have is going and seeing Flash Gordon with him as a kid, and I'll never forget that moment. But since then, he was the one who introduced me to all that. So it's funny how our fathers can really instill in us what our passions are. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk about it all the time, because there's always, most of my favorite movies of all time, there's a dad memory attached to it. And so it's hard for me to even talk about it without bringing up like, oh, my dad showed me this, or, you know, I remember when me and my dad were watching this. And so, yeah, there was a big stretch of my childhood where it was just me and him. And so we kind of have that forever bond regarding all those memories.
Yeah, I bet, man. So, and again, going back to your dad, you said he was a single parent. So your dad was the one who primarily raised you?
Yeah. I mean, my mom she left when I was like 2 and change. She came back and forth a little bit here and there. So I have some sporadic memories throughout my first, 12 or 13 years of life. But yeah, 99% of my upbringing was my dad. Oh, yeah.
And how much of an impact, like other than movies, what other attributes do you think your dad instilled in you as a man now?
Pretty much everything that I try to do for a husband and a father, in certain ways. Like I didn't have that mom and dad example growing up. I mean, my dad didn't meet my stepmom, who he's been married to for years, until I was 14. And so by then I was already, a teenager. I was already kind of developed. There wasn't a whole lot more instilling to do.
Doing your thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things where there's things that I've seen my dad do that I try to do as a husband. There's also things that my dad does that I've seen that I try not to do. So learn from other people's mistakes type of thing. And mostly as a father, I always try to follow some of the examples that he set, because it got to a point where, like I said, my mom kind of came and went, and my dad was always trying to kind of try to get things back together, try to get things back on track whenever she would. And so by the time I was 11 or 12, I can't exactly remember, I had 3 siblings. And so I'm making it more comedic than it actually was, but it seemed for a while there, it was like my mom would show back up, drop a kid off, and then leave again.
No way, really?
Yeah. Wow. And so
this is like for like months at a time, weeks at a time, or?
No, like my brother was born when I was 7.
Okay.
And he's not biologically my father's. So she was pregnant by somebody else, came back to Ohio where we lived, got back with my dad. My dad took him in as his own, raised him, all the way up until he was like 13 or 14, decided to go and spend some time with his biological dad in Texas. But he still kind of considers my dad like his dad. He doesn't have a relationship with his biological dad anymore. So my dad raised a son that wasn't his. And then a couple of years after that, my mom came back and they had my sister together. And then a year later had another sister. And then she took off again. And so at one point it was my dad and 4 children with no help.
No way. I didn't know that.
Making, wow. I don't know, less than $20,000 a year. So it's one of those things where I tell them all the time now, because like me and my wife have been together since day one. We've never split or anything like that. We've got 3 kids. We both, up until I did YouTube, worked full-time jobs. Even this is still a full-time job, but I got more flexibility.
Right.
But we did all of that, and we would still get stressed out and be like, how do we do this? This sucks, man. Like, there's never time. And then I would always think back and I'm like, just shut up. Because look at what your dad did. Like he worked full time, worked multiple jobs, had no help. My grandma helped a little bit, but so yeah, I look back and still to this day, I don't know how he did it. Where you have 4 kids, 2 of which were basically infants by yourself, working full time, until he met my stepmom within, like a year or 2 after that. So yeah, it's all of the things that I grew up seeing that he did for me, did for my brother Dylan, who wasn't even his. I mean, taking somebody back that you love that has now got a kid by somebody else, like I can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
And even just seeing how he's continued to be with, grandkids, my daughter, my kids, my sister's kid and stuff like that. He's always probably going to be the person that I look up to the most and try to take the most from.
Yeah, that's wow, man. Because again, we both know, and we both have seen, families get divorced or raised by single parents, and we've seen disasters where the parent is just not there, the kids are just doing their own thing, and it can be a big mess. But for your dad, man, to raise 4 children on his own, that's rare, and that's a fucking they should just clone him. Like the T-800, and that's the role model for each father right there, dude. He's got all the attributes of what it takes to be a man, dude. So that's pretty badass. So you were the oldest then out of all your siblings. So you had to grow up pretty fast, and I bet, did you have to really cook for them and just be the big dad and man of the house when he wasn't there?
Yeah, no, I definitely had to. I wouldn't say I really learned to cook too much. I could throw some shit together, but yeah, I remember there was whenever he had to work Saturdays, I would have to wake up early. He would go to work at like 6, so I'd have to wake up that early and take care of my brother and my sister, who was still a baby, in the playpen and everything like that until he got home that afternoon. I kind of had to manage myself in a lot of ways, getting off to school on time and everything without anybody there in the morning.
Yeah,
there was a lot of things where I kind of feel like I was half brother and half other parent for a lot of years with my siblings. Even my youngest brother, who was my dad and my stepmom. There was still a long time where I was kind of also the third parent there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't necessarily miss out on my childhood because I did have a good one, especially considering all the stuff that was going on. But I definitely had to grow up and mature fast. I've always felt like I'm about 10 years ahead of everybody else my age.
Yeah. That's probably why we get along so well, because I'm 45 and you're what? You're 32, 33 or something?
I'll be 33 in January.
Yeah, you have that old soul, old mentality. You're not immature or saying stupid shit, other than you like Halloween 2 from Rob Zombie. But just kidding. But you have a like an old soul is what I was trying to say. So. But
yeah, I've always kind of felt that way. It's always made me have a bit of a disconnect with people my age, all the way through junior high school especially. I've just always felt a little out of place. I would still, have friends. I would be able to have fun and everything, but I just when especially in high school when you have these kids just going off and doing the dumbest possible thing they can as soon as they get freedom, like, oh, I got my car today. Let's go 90 on 95, and
yeah.
There's a guy in class over there that said he can get us pills, and like it's all these stuff where I'm just like, what are you guys doing? And so it's I've been better off for it, but it definitely made it difficult for a long time because I didn't feel like I was among peers. I felt like I was among children sometimes.
Yeah. You mentioned bullying just a few minutes ago and how to deal with that. Of course, you have your home life and being, like you said, like the other parent / big brother. And you were how old at this time? 14 maybe, or maybe younger when you were doing this at home?
When I was doing what at home?
Like raising your helping your father with your siblings, like with 14, 15. Like you said, you got up early on Saturdays.
No, that was when I was like 9 or 10.
Damn.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, my brother was born in 97, and I'm pretty sure my sister was born in 2000. I could be wrong. I'm terrible with dates and birthdays, but it wasn't that much later. So yeah, I was like 10 doing all of that. And I remember, and all the while, there was always this lingering threat or this lingering drama regarding my mother. She was always a big alcoholic. Eventually she got into drugs and everything around the time that she stopped having kids. And so there was always this lingering threat of like, if your mom shows up, you don't let her in, call me. And, this is back when you didn't have cell phones, you had pagers. Yeah. My dad, like, just page me 911 or something like that if mom shows up. And And so even though I knew what I needed to do, I always felt like I was, one eye over my shoulder, and like somebody going to knock on the door. And so it was always this very weird situation for a kid that old to be in, to where I very much had to be an adult. I had to take on the responsibility of an adult, because my dad had no other choice but to give me that role.
Yeah, here you said earlier that you learned from others' mistakes. So you said your mother was into drugs and alcohol. So I don't know. I've asked you a couple times, like, hey, let's go have a beer, and you said, no, I don't drink. So is that kind of stemmed? Is that the origin of why you don't drink or maybe do drugs, or do you do drugs? I don't know.
No, I never have. It's a big part of it. Yeah, I mean the drug thing for certain. I've never had any interest in any of that. Even nowadays when you got everybody that's like, oh, CBD, or we can smoke a joint. It's cool. It's legal, bro. And I'm like, I'm good. But drinking. I don't know. Like rare occasion. If it's a party or something like that, I might have a beer or something, but I'm not really, I don't need it. I don't get the same satisfaction that I think a lot of other people do. You always see those people where they get home from, Friday and it's the weekend. Oh, I can't wait to just have a beer and sit down. Yeah. And it just, I don't know. I've never had that relationship with it to where I'm like, oh, I can't wait to have this. And just a big part of that has been all the things that I saw and had to endure growing up, to where, you just seeing my mom plastered at parties and embarrassing. And even my dad on occasion, he would very, very rarely get that point, but he would still get drunk once in a while, which is weird to interpret when you're a kid. Like, why is mom and dad acting funny? So things like that, it didn't really hit me until I had kids, because I would go downtown and drink and have, fun and stuff like that here and there. But as soon as I got with Holly and became a dad, it always felt weird to me to have a drink in my hand if they were around. I never really wanted them to have any of those memories with me. Like, remember that one time when Dad got all silly? I just don't want that.
Yeah, and God, we have so much in common here, because I'm the same way. When I had kids, before then, I used to get blackout drunk. Like, and back then, I'd wake up, where's my wallet? Where's my phone? I said, what last night? Oh my God. It was like a big mess. But after kids, I became like a social drinker. Like, whenever people came to the house, hey, you want a beer? Sure. It was more or less those things. And I did get buzzed, but I haven't gotten blackout drunk since maybe 2004, because I didn't want to wake up in jail. Oh, guess what? You ran into a tree or something like that. I'd never wanted to be that irresponsible because of my kids. It's funny how our kids kind of shape us, and we think about them before we even do anything, man. So, and what's funny, as you're telling your story, man, you had a very Hispanic upbringing. It's the same thing, man. It's like all my cousins and tias, everything you just said, from being the parent when the parents had to go work, cooking up dinner, and watching out for the parent who had abuse problems with alcohol or drugs. I'm going to give you, you're forever invited to the barbecue, man.
Awesome. So. I'm an honorary Hispanic.
Hispanic, yes.
There you go.
Your middle name is Javier.
I'll take it.
Man, so Holly is your wife, right?
Yes.
So when did you first meet?
When I was 24. So I worked at Target at the time. I worked as a manager at Target. I worked at Target for 4 years. First year was electronics, and then I moved up and was a manager for about 3 years. But there was a woman that worked there that I just talked to, rarely. We worked on very different ends of the building. Yeah. But at least 2 or 3 occasions, I remember her saying something to the effect of like, "Oh, my cousin would love you." I remember one conversation specifically. It was one of the longer times that we talked. We were just kind of bullshitting in the break room, and I don't know. We were talking about something. I don't even remember what I said, but I made her laugh, and she goes, "You're a sarcastic asshole. My cousin would be perfect for you." and awesome. It was just like it was the funniest like mix of like a dig and a compliment at the same time.
Yeah,
and so. I was at a point where at some point I started talking to her more online later on after I had left Target because we had similar interests in music and stuff like that. And I was having girl problems with all of the various horrible short relationships that I was going through at the time, where I'm just like, is there something wrong with me? Like, why can I not make a relationship last like 2 weeks? And she was one of the women that I talked to. I'm like, what's the deal? Like, am I crazy or is she just like a psycho? And there was a point where I think after the third time I'd contacted her, she's like, my cousin's single now. I'm gonna set you two up. And my wife still gives me shit for this. So she gave Holly my contact info on Facebook or whatever, and Holly started messaging me. And she was in the military at the time. She was finalizing her divorce. And something about, because I guess I was just, I was on the tail end of like 3 or 4 failed quick relationships where I was just like, man, I don't want any women right now. Just to hell with all of you. And so I was just not in the mood for anybody new. And so she messaged me and we talked for like a day or so. And then I kind of just stopped responding. So she says that I ghosted her. And so about maybe 3 weeks later, I remember I was in the gym and I was starting to feel better. You know, I had enough time from all the bullshit and everything from the last couple. And I was sitting there and I was in between sets and I was sitting there, I was like, man, maybe I should contact that Holly girl now. That's probably a good time now. And I swear to God, within probably 5 minutes of me thinking that, she messaged me on Facebook. Oh, and she was like, so are you going to take me on a date or what? Like,
nice. Assertive. I love that.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Very. Still is. And so it was just one of those weird things where I was like, oh, that's a sign, I guess. So then we went out, finally, had a really good time. She wanted to go out again. I did too. We both wanted to go out the second day. Like we went for a Saturday date and then she's like, all right, I don't have anything going on tomorrow. So Sunday we're going to do it again. Yeah. And just, hit it off very quickly. This was November of 2014 that we started dating. By January, beginning of February, we had moved in. And,
really?
Yeah.
Okay. That's fast.
Yeah, it was. Everybody, all the family members are like, you guys are nuts. So you don't know what you're doing. This is going to be a disaster. And I don't know. We just knew something about it. We just knew. I felt comfortable with it. I'm not really somebody that jumps into things. I'm not somebody that is very spontaneous, but there was just something about it. I knew that it was going to be fine.
You just had this instinct. Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I want to talk about single Cody because I don't know single Cody stories that well. So you met your wife at 24. So let's talk about the single days. What was single Cody like?
I worked very strange hours because after I had left Target, I started working for this construction company where I was doing materials testing and concrete testing and everything. And so you would have to go off whenever they were doing concrete pours. That could be 1 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
And so I kept very weird hours and made it difficult to date anybody because you never knew, at least Monday through Friday, you never really knew what your schedule was going to be until the next day when you saw it. And so, yeah, I think I had went to college, did not enjoy it, made the mistake of letting my parents pick what I was going to pursue in college. Don't ever do that. Yeah. And so I spent a year hating my life, just like, why am I here? This sucks. I hate these classes. I'm by myself. This is weird. So I had like the world's worst first year of college. Moved back home, decided not to go back to college, tried to work. So from 19 until 23, I lived back at home. As soon as I paid off my truck and made enough money, finally being a manager to be able to afford an apartment, I moved out within like a month. And so, this is around the time when I finally had my own place for the first time. And so, yeah, I was wild for a little bit there where it was just like a mile a minute. If I wasn't working, I was pursuing something.
Yeah.
I think there was, the year before I met Holly, there was probably 5 or 6 relationships in that year. And so, yeah, it was kind of like letting the leash off finally, because I never really dated at all when I lived at home. It just felt weird to me. I'm like, I can't take anybody
you don't
anywhere.
Bring a girl home, right?
Yeah, I'm like, I can't take anybody anywhere. I don't want to have that embarrassing conversation. Like, so where do you live? With my dad and my mom. Like, you know. So, so that year I kind of got it all out of my system. That it's been like,
there you go.
That's been like bent up for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. I did the same thing after my divorce. I got an apartment. Jesus Christ, if those walls can talk. It was just like Sodom and Gomorrah, like every weekend, dude. Because I just had 16 years of just like just built up in me. So yeah, I definitely let it out and had a good time, man. But good Lord, man. But let me ask you this. So, guys, because again, you obviously know I'm on TikTok. I know I have a lot of people talking about dating advice and, you know, how to approach women. It sounds like you didn't have any problem approaching women, but how'd you go about it? Did you meet them on dating apps, or did you just walk up to them? You seem to be like the old soul to walk up to a woman and, you know, start the conversation there. So how did you meet these women?
I had a couple that I just kind of walked up to because right about a year or so before the year that I moved out, I got into really good shape. There was just like a switch that went off. There was this girl that I was trying to have a relationship with that I worked with at Target. That is like the world's worst human being on earth.
Okay.
And so the level of mistreatment that she gave me, to where like every single time that it kind of came down to me wanting to like define what we are, like, are we dating? Like, what's going on? Like, yeah. Whatever she told me was always like the most soul crushing statement she could make. And it just made me feel like the biggest piece of garbage in the world. And so after that, after a couple of months, like this switch went off to where it wasn't even necessarily to prove to her. It was just to prove to myself that I wasn't that. And so I became like a bit of a gym nut, got into really good shape. And so after that, I had a lot more confidence than I ever had in my life. So I would be able to walk up to women that I would have been petrified to do that even just a year previous.
Yeah.
So I had a couple that were like that, but for the most part, it was online dating during that year, which was a weird thing for me because it had this negative stigma to it to a degree back then, where I'm like,
it still does.
Yeah, or it's very convenient, but at the same time, there's this weirdness to it. It never really feels normal because of how many decades and decades we've had the traditional, you know, meet cute or whatever. And so it was a combination of that. I probably, of the 5 or 6 relationships that I had, I think maybe 4 of them were from online dating, and 2 of them was just from me walking up and starting a conversation.
Yeah.
There was one. It was a girl that I knew in high school. This was like the big like validation moment that I was.
Yeah, we all have that moment of the girl in high school that we wanted to hook up with, whatever, and there she is at 22, 23 or something like that. Yes, we all have that story. Go ahead.
Yes, I was in the food court, and the Target that I worked at is attached to a mall, so I was in the mall food court, and I caught her out the corner of my eye, and I was like, "Oh, it's that person," and I kept glancing over, and I was eating lunch, and then one time when the last time that I went to glance, she glanced at me, and you know, you had that fright night moment. Yeah. Fright night moment. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. And she was just like, hey, and then walked over, and I'm like, I didn't even think she knew who I was. And then she sat down, like just like invited herself to join me for lunch, and by then I was like, well, I'm in. Shit, there's no reason not to even ask for her number or anything. So that was the big moment for me, where it was just like God was sending me a sign, like, you have made it. You have graduated. This is your sign.
Here's your gift.
Yes, exactly.
So again, it sounds like you didn't have you had this one bad experience, and everybody tends to have that negative one. I've spoken many times about mine, and that's really like I guess like the lowest we can go, but then we rebuild ourselves either with mental health or going to the gym, and we just become like the Super Saiyan version or whatever we're going to be. So, okay, so you had a fun single life for a few years, and then you met Holly, and you were dating for a few months, and then you moved in together. The other stigma I want to ask you is this. In the dating world right now, it's incredibly toxic. I think there's just a lot of confusion with young men out there. They have this weird expectations of what women should be. A lot of people are saying they should be traditional with roles and, you know, do women things, you know, let me be the man. There's all this confusion. And one of those items is dating a single mom. And you said Holly was just getting divorced, and she had one child or two?
2.
She had 2 children. Okay. A lot of young guys nowadays frown upon single mothers. Like, they call them used up goods. I don't want a used car. I don't want to. They compared children. The worst term I've heard is like, why do you want to play with another man's PlayStation memory card? All this bullshit. And it's just a very young, idiotic way of thinking. Yeah. And here you are. You married to Holly. You're still married. You've been married, what, 7 years now?
No, we've been together since 2014, but we've only been married for 2 years.
Okay, but
or, I'm sorry, 1 year. 1 year.
Gotcha. Okay. But what would you say to like the young men out there? Because again, obviously, you're a grown man. You have principles and you have more character and more compass that others should replicate. So what would you say to those young men out there in their 20s saying, "Nah, don't date a single mom. What the hell's wrong with you?"
I need to correct this. Otherwise, it's going to come back to bite me in the ass. Like I said, I was sick. My head is spinning a little bit. It was 2 years. Okay. I was like, oh, yeah, 2022 plus 2, 2020. Okay, yeah, 2. So, yes, I've been married for 2 years.
2 years.
Sorry. But, yeah. So
apologize. She's not even in the room.
It doesn't matter. She'll find out somehow.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. I don't know. I couldn't tell you my age right now. It's where my head's kind of... But you have, so yeah, there's part of the negative stigma that I understand the hesitation that young, especially young guys have, single guys, because it's very difficult to have a relationship in general nowadays, or has always been really. Relationships are tough. It's exponentially harder when you have 2, 3, 1 children added into it. And so I understand people, like if they had to choose, or like if you have woman A who's single or woman B who's single and has 2 kids, which one would you pick? Like I get that to an extent. Mm-hmm. But the truth is it's not a reflection on the woman the way that it seems like all these gross comments are making it out to be, like she's used goods or she's damaged goods or anything like that. That's a pretty shitty way to look at it. In a lot of ways, women that have been through a bad marriage or relationship or whatever, and they've had to raise children, they're ahead of the curve in some ways, to where you kind of have to get past that maturity growth that you also oftentimes have to battle when you're dating, to where you meet somebody, they had a very different upbringing from you. You might be 10 years more mature than her, or vice versa, and it's hard to be an immature woman and raise kids. So there's a lot of things to where, like how I had to grow up very quickly as a child, when women are, or dads, when you have a parent that has to be single, you have to grow up very quickly. You can't have as many fun times as you used to. You can't really focus on what you're going to go out and party or what you're going to do this weekend. At least good parents won't. You live for your kids now. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was something that kind of connected me and Holly a lot, was where I was very mature for my age. I felt like I was very ahead of the curve, and she was, raising 2 kids and had been raising a child since she was 16. So there was a big growth that she had to go through in many ways, to where she's, having to go to doctor's appointments and all these other things that to me is just like so far away in my future. And so it just made for a bit of a good link up, I guess, between me and her.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that I'll say is that, like, I think there needs to be a lot more scrutiny on whoever's going to be coming into the house, whoever's going to be coming into the relationship, than the woman who's already there. I mean, if her and her 2 kids, and you get all these people that are scrutinizing them as, used goods or whatever, when the big test is going to be on the guy that walks into that, because you have guys that walk in that are only interested in the mom, and the kids are just, white noise. You have guys that will walk in and get really attached to the kids, but won't gel with the woman very well. And then, it's a whole other animal, because whenever you walk into a relationship, you're not just dating her, you're dating her and her kids to a degree.
I had relationships myself when I was divorced. Of course, I have 2 kids, and I would date a woman who had kids themselves. There were times I broke up with a woman because the kids didn't get along.
Yeah.
And it's just like one of those things, okay, we got to do what's best for the kids, and we had to end the relationship. So you're right. It's a totally different beast.
Yeah. There's a lot more going on, and there's a lot more to be careful with too, because, you might like the mom a lot, and then you might end up liking the kids, and then things don't work out. And then you're kind of, by no fault of your own, possibly, you're adding to the trauma that's clearly already there with the kids.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot. It's a lot. It's a totally different animal, really is. So I understand the hesitation. I understand ideally, a lot of guys are like, oh, you know, I'd rather start my family from scratch. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to have to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
But if you meet the right woman with the right kids, and you're the right man, sometimes you're what that family needed. You know, that was very much the thing with me. You know, that my oldest two, their father's not around, never has been. It's a very
I was going to ask
similar.
That. So nothing, huh? Wow.
No, very similar situation with my mom, where it was always, you know, drugs, alcohol, crime, stuff like that. And so he, from what I understand, was barely ever there, and certainly has not been there since I've been around. Mm-hmm. So I'm the only dad they know. I'm dad. I'm not Cody. You know what I mean? Gotcha. I'm very much a puzzle piece that needed to be added for that picture to be complete.
Yeah. And you know, when you mentioned your upbringing earlier, and with your dad being the role model that he was and caring for kids that, you know, weren't technically his biological children, but he did. It sounds like that role model and that history and that, you know, experience is what kind of like led you to being the man that you are now, especially with raising children.
Yeah, him and my stepmom, honestly, because I mean, she came in when I was, you know, 13 or so. My dad was already 4 kids deep, had all this baggage. You know, talking about baggage, that motherfucker had some baggage. And so, you know, she came in and, you know, they had another kid, and she's always been, you know, she, even just in 1 year, she was more of a mom to me than my biological mom ever was. And to my 2 sisters, that's the only mom they ever knew. They barely even saw my mom when they were a baby, and certainly haven't seen her but maybe once or twice since.
Yeah.
So really the combination of the two of them, where you have my dad showing, you know, he's raising my brother who's not his, and raised him from day one, and doesn't look at him any differently than he does me or my sisters. There's no, like, I'm in a family where the terms like half brother, half sister doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Technically I only have half brothers, but I've never looked at them as half siblings. That's just a weird, I know why it exists. It's just a weird term to me.
I agree.
So yeah, it's a combo of seeing my dad, seeing what he dealt with, seeing how he stepped up, also seeing how my stepmom came in, instant family, and how that, you know, all worked out. And it's funny. It's kind of like carrying on the tradition in a certain way with mm-hmm. where I kind of went, but also in a weird way, it was almost like karma for how much of a bullheaded dickhead I was when I was like 13, 14. Because when you go your entire life without a mom, all of a sudden you've got this female figure in the house making rules. You're like,
who are you?
Who the hell are you? You know what I mean? So there was me and her butted heads for quite a few years. We've had nothing but a great relationship since I moved out, especially. But I do think that some of it was kind of like a you know, life's sick, twisted humor, where it's like, oh, you think it's easy, huh? Here you go. So
it's funny how that always ends up being the way it is, man. But
yep.
You're right. You said a lot of things about single mothers. Like I said, when I was dating, I preferred dating a single mother because of schedules, and I knew how things could just fall, you know, up at the last minute because someone got sick with the babysitter, fell through. But every majority of all the single mothers I dated, they never, like these young guys say, were looking for financial support. They had their shit together. Mm-hmm. They never wanted me to be a father to these kids because they had like a father role model already involved in their lives. And I get if you don't want to, like you said, start on the ground running with a family already. Okay, that's your preference, fine. But it's the insulting and the name calling that I fucking can't stand.
Oh, yeah.
The low-hanging fruit she's run through. And I know all that stems from jealousy, because all these guys are saying, oh, she got run through in her 20s and now she wants me. No, she didn't pick you in the 20s. That's why you have this animosity toward these women who do have families and that you're meeting. So it's just jealousy and hurt butt feelings inside these red pill guys that I see all the time on social media. And again, if that's not your preference, fine. Go date a woman who doesn't have kids. That's fine. But it's just the name calling and this stigma that they're just spewing all over the place is what I can't stand. And when in the reality, a lot of single mothers are some of the strongest women I've ever met, because just like you just confirmed, the father in that situation is always not there or not present. And if anyone's going to be name calling on social media, these fuckers should be name calling the dads who aren't being fathers and stepping up and owning up to the responsibilities. That's the ones who should get the fucking stigma, not the women.
Well, not only that, but it's incredibly arrogant to put yourself in a position where you're talking down to other people as if you're some gigantic catch. Like they're not worthy of gaining you. And
but I'm a nice guy, Cody. I'm a nice guy is what they say. Yeah. Like, no, shut the fuck up, dude. It takes more than just being a nice guy.
Like yeah.
I can't stand that at all, man. But that's what usually I see all the time on social media. And I really wanted to get your take on that because, again, if anybody should look up to anybody as far as, being a parental figure or just role model, it's you, man, especially after your dad kind of instilled that in you. So I applaud you for what you're doing because you make it look easy, but it's not.
It's not. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's not. It's hard. I mean, it's hard having kids in general.
Oh,
kids are hard. It doesn't matter how much you love them, how much you have fun.
Sorry, honey.
Hey, I got no problem saying how it is. Like there's me and my wife's favorite phrase is "fuck them kids."
Yeah.
So
exactly. We say that with love, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. It's a term of endearment. So you got kids are work constantly, even on the easy times, even on good days, they're still work because they rely on you for everything up until the point where they leave. And nowadays, more times than not, they still rely on you more than people used to when they leave the house. So it's hard even if you have just your own kids. When you have kids that their personalities are already set, they already have habits, they already have expectations and baggage and even emotional damage and stuff like that from what's been going on. It's tenfold because, you walk in and it's been such a weird, different experience raising my oldest two versus raising my youngest, who's the only one who's biologically mine, because I got to mold her from day one.
Right.
Whereas the other two, I kind of had to chip away the hard edges and try to, mold them when they were already kind of half dry, if that makes any sense. So it's different because, genetics are a bitch. I'm a firm believer that even in situations where the biological parent isn't around, there's always something that seeps their way into the kids. So there's certain attitude or there's certain things that you'll have to deal with that it's just going to be like, where does this come from? And it's from that other dude.
Yep.
You're going to, there's, of course, there's always going to be, depending on what age, and it also depends on the kids, there's always going to be a little bit of a fight to where there's this mutual acknowledgement. It's like, okay, on paper, I guess I'm not your dad or I'm not your mom or whatever it is, but I'm the one who's raising you. And so depending on the age you have the kids, there's also going to be the battle with that. That was the battle that I had with my stepmom, is because by then I was already 13 years old going on 21, you know what I mean? Because I was already kind of mentally above where I was. And it was just like, you're my dad's girlfriend. You know what I mean? It's you're going to fight that.
That sounds like that cliche kid in every movie that we've ever seen.
Yeah. And if you've been that kid, you have a lot more sympathy to that kid than everybody else does, where you're, he's a dick. And I'm like, I don't know. He's got some good points. Let's hear what he got to say. So yeah, I mean,
let me ask you this, being that kid, and just to kind of give everybody perspective, is it the person coming into your life, like telling you what to do, or it's just their presence?
It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. I remember whenever my dad was dating her, whenever she was very, very early on, there's always that little bit of a phase to where everybody's overly nice because they want to put on a good impression. They don't want to freak you out or whatever. And then once everybody starts to get comfortable, the real personality starts to come out.
Yeah.
And so I had my dad to myself for the most part my entire childhood. And so there was certainly a bit of selfishness there where I didn't really want to share him with somebody else because I knew that my time with him was going to be smaller now. The attention that I was going to get was going to be smaller and different. There's also the thing about just the problem of authority, which I've always had. Probably from not having a mother around. I've always had that. To where even the simplest rules of like, you don't need another soda. I'm like, the fuck I don't. Who are you? You know what I mean? So there's always things like that too that would always kind of get on my nerves. And then also because they do change your parent. You know, my dad did change a little bit, not like drastically, not like he was a different person, but you know, when you get into a relationship, you mold each other to a degree.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so the things that was being molded, I'm like, what are you doing? That's not my dad. He doesn't wear the kind of shirt. Put your Harley Davidson shirt back on. Quit being a little bitch. And so, things like that. I remember one day, like, we never really went to church ever growing up. Maybe 2 times I can remember. And I remember there was this day where she came in, and I don't think she was a big church goer either, but I guess it was something to where now that, you know, the family was complete, they wanted to continue on what a textbook family's supposed to do. And I remember we were sitting in my dad's truck, and he's like, yeah, we're going to go to church this Sunday. And I was like, oh yeah. And he's like, yeah, probably every Sunday after that too. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, and you're going to start going to Sunday school? And I remember I was just like, what the hell, man? Like, what are we doing here? Yeah. This isn't my life. What are we doing? Even positive things, not that church isn't positive, but like even things where it's like, I remember, you know, my dad didn't have a whole lot of money growing up. We were very fine financially. It's shocking. Like we wanted for nothing, and we needed for nothing. We wanted for very little. Mm-hmm. But even where there was something to where they wanted to take us to like a vacation or something like that. And I'm like, we never went on vacations before. What the hell is this? It was just anything foreign. Yeah, it was a good thing, but it was just like, this isn't us. What are we doing? And so I remember it's so funny to look back on as an adult where I'm just like, you ungrateful little shit. Just shut up and go on vacation. But like, I remember my mindset back then. I was just like, this isn't me. This isn't my life. I don't like
Changing me.
Yeah, exactly.
So what advice would you give like parents or anybody out there who is going into a relationship and that other person has a 14-year-old or 13-year-old little Cody Leach in there? So what best advice could you give them?
Drugs and alcohol. No.
Horror movies.
It's hard because, you know, I didn't have to deal with that. My son was 7 and my middle daughter was 4 when I came into their lives. So they were still fairly young. My daughter especially, there wasn't a whole lot of personality set in. My son was a different story, but it's difficult. It really depends on the teenager because some teenagers are more headstrong than others. I think that the mistakes that my parents made that made it harder for me was that there was no easing into the situation. They were like 100 miles an hour with their relationship. You know, my dad had been single for so long. He had this horrible relationship with my mother. Even the women that he did date, I only remember meeting 2 of my dad's girlfriends my entire life. And I know he had way more than that. So he was very hesitant about bringing any women around me. Unless he felt sure about them, which obviously the 2, he ended up not being that sure.
Yeah.
But whenever they got together, they started dating, and then within, I want to say 6 months, it might have even been sooner than that. At some point, she was practically there every single day, staying the night, and then they were pregnant. And so
it was pretty fast.
It was very fast. And so, not that all relationships are going to be that way, but that's what made it really difficult for me, was that there was no honeymoon phase, I guess, with me. It was just like, you know, here's my friend from work. Here's my girlfriend. Here's my girlfriend who's living with us. Here's my girlfriend who's pregnant with your new brother. By the way, we're getting married and we're moving to the other end of the country this summer.
Oh,
and so, yeah, I had it rough. Yeah, it all worked out for the best, but I had it rough because there was just so much change so fast. And kids don't really respond to that the same way as teenagers or adults, to where teenagers have a lot more, they hold on to what their comfort is, their life is, more than kids will. Kids like new things and spontaneity and changing it up. Once you're in that teenage phase, you kind of just want things to stay the same because your body's changing so much. You don't need your life changing at the same time. That
makes sense. That's good perspective. And plus, you probably have friends already, and you kind of have your world forming around you. So that makes a lot of sense, man.
Yeah, so that's the biggest thing is if you're coming in with a teenager or even a preteen is that you gotta be patient. You know, you gotta take it slow with them. You gotta be their friend for a while before you need to start being a parent. And hopefully it's the type of kid that's not going to make that rough. But it's always rough when you have a new authority figure that's just, they have the authority because they've earned it with your parent that haven't earned it with you.
Yeah.
And so that was what always was the hard part, where it was just like, what gives you authority is that you're sleeping with my father. So please tone that shit down around me because you haven't earned it with me yet. That was kind of always my attitude. And to a degree I was right, to a degree I was immature. But that's the biggest thing there. It's just, it's going to take a while. That's not going to be like with little kids where they're just like, they're ready to call you dad or mom within the first week because they just don't have one, where the teenager is going to be like, no, sorry.
You bring up a good point because, believe it or not, my girlfriend and you have very similar upbringings where she had to grow up really fast. Her mom, she has no siblings, but her mom dated, you know, after their dad died, she just kind of dated a lot of people, and some of them weren't the best role models as far as men go. And she had to grow up and look out for her mom from time to time. And when she and I started dating, I've always been protective of my kids. I never, like I said, they met maybe 2-3 women in the 6 years I was dating.
Yeah.
But we were very slow with introducing my girlfriend into my kids. Like, if they didn't want to meet up with her, that was fine. We never put pressure on them. And it took 2 years for my kids to come around. And that's when we finally started doing normal things. But she was very patient because she was that kid. Yeah. Just like you at one point. And I respected that. And there's not a lot of people who have that perspective. So you're right, man. It does take time. And I can totally see that it's kind of like in an invasion sort of sense of people coming into your space and things are changing. You have no say. That sucks.
It's scary. It's scary. Because like I said, kids love change. Kids love, oh, we're going where? We're doing this? This is different? Okay, cool, fun. You know, it's like life is an adventure. And then when you're a teenager and you're like, no, I'm not in an adventurous mood. Leave me alone. I don't want anything new right now.
Well, we're almost out of time, man. But I know going back to your YouTube channel, this is like your Super Bowl season time of year, right? You got October coming up and you have a big thing called 31 on 31. Tell everybody about that who doesn't know.
Well, we have one coming up here on Wednesday. Sometimes we do more than one a year, but the big premiere one is October 31st. And so essentially what we do is we pick some horror franchises. We pick a theme. The franchises add up to 31 as far as the number of films there. And so it's essentially ranking 31 movies with a particular theme. Like last year was Unholy Terrors. So we did Exorcist and Conjuring and things like that, like possession, demon possessions type stuff. So I haven't announced what the theme is for this year, but it's going to be something pretty special. So that's going to be the big thing to look out for, October 31st. But yes, October, I'm tired already just looking at all the things that are coming out, because you've got Halloween coming out, which is just going to be a monster in and of itself. You've got Terrifier 2 coming out.
Yes.
You've got, there's at least 2 or 3 others, I swear. I'm blanking just because I'm under the weather, but there's like 3 or 4 big horror franchise. Chucky, the TV series, coming back.
Season 2, right?
Yes. Yeah. So there's like 3 or 4 premier horror franchises having a new movie coming out in October or right before October. And so I look at my calendar and I'm like, I need more than 31 days in October, because this is about to be like a video a day minimum. So yeah, it's going to be crazy. Wow. It's going to be balls to the wall this year.
I don't know how you do it, man. Like I said, by that 3rd video, I'd be like Lieutenant Brand the Alien. It's like, talk to me. I don't know what to say. Yeah. Just like, I'd be burnt out, man. But I don't know how you do it. But hey, that's why you are where you're at. And that's why you are this YouTube superstar that you are. So again, Cody Leach, I appreciate your time, man, for talking to me and giving us a piece of you that not many people maybe not know about. I didn't know about, and I learned a lot about you, dude. So thank you so much, man.
Yeah, no problem. It was fun.
And Cody, once again, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. And everybody, all his social media links are down below along with mine. Go to his YouTube channel, subscribe, watch a few of his videos. I promise you won't be disappointed. And next week, I have a big announcement right now. I have Lauren, the Davigate from TikTok, who's going to be on the show. She just crossed 1 million followers, and we're going to have a great discussion regarding double standards and fathers' rights regarding child custody. So stay tuned for next week. And everybody, thank you for listening. I will see you next time.